Awesome. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Beauty Without PFAS, the implications of the EU Commission's revision of the Cosmetics Directive and how to future-proof your brand. We are so happy to have you all here today. This webinar will be recorded and the slides will be made available after. We can change slide and take a look at the agenda for today. So we have 45 minutes here today, and we will first give you an introduction to ChemSec. Then we will talk about PFAS movement. And after this, we will discuss PFAS chemicals, both a short introduction and its use in cosmetics. Teresa will then talk about legislation. And after that, we will hear from Caroline Thunsted, COO of IDUN Minerals and their work on PFAS. We will finish off with a Q&A, so if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A and we will discuss them at the end. You're also very welcome to send us an email after the webinar if you prefer that. Next slide, please. So, a short introduction to ChemSec and why you should listen to us. ChemSec was founded in 2002 and is a non-profit environmental organization based in Sweden. We are driving the change towards safer chemicals and assist companies to be more progressive in chemical matters. We are an accredited stakeholder in several relevant EU committees. Our opinions are considered by all levels of the EU Commission, and we regularly advise parliamentarians, different commission cabinets, and other relevant people on chemicals policy. We also work directly with companies, ensuring that they are up to date with legislation and facilitating communication with other companies. We receive half of our funding from governments and the rest from various charity funds. We always try to be a positive voice that highlights positive examples. Next slide, please. We have a number of different tools: Synlist, Similarity, Marketplace, and ChemScore. I will talk shortly about the Synlist and Marketplace. Next slide, please. The Synlist is our most known tool, and it is probably more known than ChemSec is. It is a globally used database of chemicals likely to be banned or restricted in the future. It is one of the most progressive chemical standards in the world. So for companies aiming to achieve truly sustainable and non-toxic chemicals management, it represents a great reference point. It consists of chemicals that have been identified by ChemSec as SVHC, substances of very high concern, based on the criteria defined within REACH, the EU chemicals legislation. So basically, the Synlist simply looks the way REACH would look without the political roadblocks. This means that following the Synlist not only means your products are safer, it also gives you the extra benefit of always being REACH compliant now and in the future. It is used by over 20,000 professionals around the globe, and many investors and financial analysts use the Synlist to avoid investing in companies producing hazardous substances and the financial risk it implies. Other uses include regulators and authorities, scientists and researchers, consultants, and NGOs. The Synlist is completely free of charge and it is regularly updated. And when joining the PFAS movement, which I will talk to you about shortly, you get offered a personal meeting with us with the possibility of tailoring the Synlist to fit your company. Next slide, please. And then we have our other tools, Marketplace. So Marketplace is a global B2B platform where you can find safer alternatives to hazardous chemicals. It started in 2017 as the first and still only platform for safer alternatives, with the aim of increasing visibility and availability of safer alternatives. Today, there's over 600 ads from more than 150 companies. All alternatives on Marketplace have one thing in common. They do not have SVHC, substances of very high concern, properties, according to the criteria laid out in the EU chemicals regulation REACH. So, meaning no substances or materials with CMR properties are allowed, neither are PBTs or BPBTs nor EDCs allowed. For clarification, CMR stands for carcinogenic, mutagenic, or reproductive. PBT stands for persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic. And EDC stands for endocrine disrupting chemicals. So none of these are allowed on Marketplace. So basically, you can think of Marketplace and Synlist as our do's and don'ts, where Marketplace represents the do's and the Synlist represents the don'ts. Next slide, please. So I will now tell you about our corporate movement, the PFAS movement. The PFAS movement was founded a year ago and is an initiative targeted from companies towards legislators to call on policymakers to regulate PFAS efficiently, with the aim of influencing PFAS restriction and facilitate a network for companies working with PFAS. Next slide, please. Many companies have already joined, and these are some of them. Next slide, please. So, what does it imply to join the PFAS movement? The 5 bullet points below are the commitments that companies sign when joining the movement. You do not need to have phased out PFAS from your products to join. Some companies that have joined still have PFAS in their products. Others just started their journey, and some phased it out years ago. Joining our initiatives means that you support a stronger PFAS regulation and that you support that PFAS substances are targeted as a group. You encourage the chemical industry to develop safer alternatives, and you publicly state that you have the ambition to phase out PFAS from products and supply chains. Now, the level of ambition is up to you as a company to decide. We don't do any follow-up controls on what you've done, but rather we expect that you investigate the presence of PFAS in your products, communicate with suppliers, and understand how it can be phased out. Next slide, please. So, what do you receive and how can you use the PFAS movement? You will receive information and advice before facing possible consequences from regulations. You will also receive assistance throughout the journey of working on the issue of PFAS. We can help you in discussions with suppliers, finding alternatives, looking into your chemicals management with the Synlist I mentioned earlier, and more. You can also use it for sustainability reporting purposes and as an internal and external communication tool and opportunity. And there's also the opportunity to communicate and connect with other companies regarding challenges and opportunities connected to PFAS. And for progressive companies, there's the opportunity to be uplifted as a role model towards other companies and policymakers. Next slide, please. Okay, so a short introduction to PFAS. PFAS stands for pair and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It is a group of approximately 5,000 chemicals. There are various estimations. We base this on the number that the World Health Organization provides. They are persistent, mobile, bioaccumulative, and toxic. The picture that you see below is a picture of PFOA, which is banned as of last year, along with PFOS. So in the EU, 2 out of these 5,000 substances are banned. And what we work towards within the PFAS movement are banning these as a group. Next slide, please. There's a large area of function and uses of PFAS. It is widely used in consumer products, such as textiles and shoes, frying pans, food packaging, cosmetics. Other examples of where it is used are fluoropolymer production, lubricants, surface treatments, electronics such as cables, and coatings like paint. There are many known adverse health effects. For example, they are cancerogenic. Another effect are liver damages. They affect fertility and reproduction. They have a reduced antibody effect. They affect cholesterol levels and can cause thyroid diseases. And since PFAS is persistent, it also leads to water contamination. We've seen a recent example of this here in Sweden, in the town of Kallinge, where the water got contaminated from fire foam. The results were shocking, as the PFAS levels in the blood of the people of Kallinge were amongst the highest measured in the world. Next slide, please. So PFAS can be found in products where we really don't want to find them. And cosmetics are especially problematic, as we apply the products on our skin, the risk of the body absorbing the chemicals is very high. And apart from the risk of the body absorbing the PFAS through the skin, the substances could also be accidentally inhaled or ingested. Next slide, please. Research shows that the use of PFAS chemicals in cosmetics is widespread. The Green Science Policy Institute very recently published a study made on PFAS in cosmetics. And I think that we have the person involved in the study here today, actually, so I better get these stats right. The study from GSPI found high levels of fluorine, indicating the presence of PFAS in more than half of the 231 cosmetic samples tested. Out of these, 29 were tested for specific PFAS, and at least 4 substances of concern were found in each sample. Very few of the tested products listed PFAS among the ingredients. Next slide, please. So, why are PFAS used in cosmetics? Well, PFAS are used in cosmetics due to their properties, which are thought to increase product wear, durability, and spreadability. Additional claimed benefits are increased skin absorption of the product and improvements in the appearance or texture of the skin. However, in most cases, the function is unclear and unnecessary, as the performance is equal as without PFAS. This has been the case for many companies when substituting PFAS in cosmetics, meaning that the most common reason for using PFAS in cosmetics is lack of knowledge. Next slide, please. There are many alternatives to PFAS. However, there's no general or one-fits-all alternative that can be used for PFAS in cosmetics. Rather, you have to find a replacement depending on the function. For example, if you're looking at the function of water repellency, you look for an alternative with similar functionality. And as PFAS is a group of 5,000 chemicals, it is very easy to make the mistake of regrettable substitution, meaning that you replace one PFAS substance for another. Avoid this by, for example, looking at the Synlist and marketplace. I now leave the floor to you, Teresa, that will tell us more about legislation and policy.
Great, thank you so much, Josephine. Yes, you can keep that slide there. Yes, I will attempt to do that. And please, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A section and I will really try to answer them afterwards or somehow. So, PFAS in cosmetics is regulated by several pieces of regulation. Under these regulations, there are several revisions and initiatives underway that will affect the use of PFAS in cosmetics. But to what extent is not yet clear. So I will attempt to summarize the main activities that are likely to happen, as well as some predictions as to what this could mean for the use of PFAS in cosmetics. So the last 2 years, there has been a great shift in the view of the importance to regulate hazardous chemicals in the EU. So I would personally say that it started with a Green Deal from the Commission that set the direction and level of ambition towards change. It was strongly supported by the European Parliament, and soon after it was followed by the Circular Economy Action Plan, where some key elements were set, clarifying some of the Commission initiatives and time plans. And then in October last year came a very important follow-up document called the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability. And this document, it's not legally binding, but it gives a very clear indication on the direction and level of ambition when it comes to chemicals. with special attention given to PFAS. So also this document has a timetable attached, which is very relevant to what I'm about to talk to today. The main pieces of regulation of relevance to this webinar, I would say, is REACH and the Cosmetics Regulation. And I will run through the main developments regarding these two regulations. And then you can switch slides, please. So the overarching regulation for chemicals in the EU is REACH. And in addition, there are about 40 other pieces of regulation relevant to chemicals, many of them being what is called product regulation, and cosmetics regulation is one of them. These regulations apply in parallel, but have different aims and level of detail. So very broadly speaking, the first step in REACH to address regulation of problematic chemicals is to place it on the candidate list. And only a handful of PFAS substances have been placed on the candidate list so far. The process is very slow. A further step to regulate candidate list substances is to use what is called the authorization procedure, which is really a ban unless you get special and time-limited authorization for continued use. But it doesn't apply to imported articles, which is a problem. And in this authorization procedure, the burden of proof is on the company. Another route, sometimes combined with authorization, is to use what's called restriction. And restrictions do apply for imported articles. But here the burden of proof is on member states, which with, in practice, a need for a much more rigorous dossier, which makes it extremely costly. So few restrictions have been pushed through the system. So REACH is going to go through extensive review, and this is planned to be ready by the end of 2022. The system to address the candidate list substances, it has been heavily criticized, and this will be addressed in a review. And the chemical strategy clearly states that regulation should be extended to ensure that consumer products do not contain certain types of chemicals based on hazardous properties rather than exposure. So to get all this in place will take a lot of time, and the Commission has recognized this and therefore said that in the meantime, they will prioritize some substances for restriction for all uses through grouping with something they call the restriction roadmap. So this is indeed very hopeful and ambitious, but regarding PFAS, there is an ongoing process already which will fit right into this, which started long before the restriction roadmap plans. So you can switch slides, please. The PFAS restriction is very broad and driven by the Netherlands in cooperation with Germany, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. The restriction is planned to cover uses where there are alternatives or where the use is non-essential. The proposed definition is very broad. I pasted it in there, and it's intending to cover all the PFAS. Cosmetics is being looked at specifically, and Sweden is responsible for this part of the dossier. And in fact, Jenny Ivarsson from the Swedish Chemicals Agency, who drives this work, she's listening in here today, so that's very good to know. On cosmetics, there is a study on the consequences, and it will be published in the autumn. This study shows that all product categories in cosmetics have alternatives, and the Swedish Chemicals Agency is very interested to learn more about the alternatives from companies like yours at a later stage. So these processes take time, and we expect a proposal on this next summer or early autumn, when it will be sent to the ECHA committees, RAC and SEAC, and then sent further to the Commission. So we could expect a restriction to be in place in 2025, but of course this could change. It's likely to assume that this restriction will change the scene completely when it comes to the use of PFAS in cosmetics. Next slide, please. So in the chemical strategy that I talked about before, it was decided to revise the cosmetics regulation. And the timeline is set for a proposal at the end of 2022. So the big change, as far as we know, is that the regulation could change its scope to cover not only health-related endpoints, but also to cover the environmental protection. And this is currently not the case. So these amendments are likely to include bans on PFAS, but there is not yet any proposal on how much of this group that will be covered or what potential exemptions would look like. However, considering the chemical strategy approach, as well as member states' previous views, I find it likely that this ban will be comprehensive and that exemptions will be very limited. And the Commission is expected to present a roadmap or what is called an inception impact assessment any day, really, probably with a proposal end of 2022. After that, it has to go through all the necessary procedures with a possible adoption in Q2 2023. So once the regulation is in place, the substances would need to be added. So exactly when the PFAS group would be covered is very unclear. Apart from the specifics on PFAS, I've had indications about what some of the key stakeholders are aiming for and expecting in a revision. One is to establish that problematic substances like carcinogens would be automatically banned when classified, address mixtures, that there should be a very high level of protection and that more endpoints should be included and a minimum of exemptions. But about 30 minutes ago, I received a contrary message from officials at the Commission saying that they do not plan for major changes, but rather to focus on other priorities in the chemical strategy. So I think we can safely say that the last word is not said on this matter and that the Commission is currently sending out some mixed signals. But to conclude, it all sounds very promising for the phase out of PFAS in cosmetics. But we know from experience that without the positive feedback from companies like yours in these processes, there's always this risk of delay, that proposals are watered down, and that regulation become full of unnecessary loopholes. So I really want to urge you all to engage in what is called public consultations announced by the Commission for all of these processes, because it really makes a difference that you have your say. So again, if you have questions on this, I know it's a lot of information. I will attempt to answer them if you put them in the Q&A. So please do that. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Josephine.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Teresa. A lot of good information to keep in mind. And I remind you again that we do have time for the Q&A at the end of this webinar. Now I would like to present to you Caroline Thunsted, COO of IDUN Minerals, that will tell us more about her company and their work on PFAS. Hi, yes. Caroline. Welcome.
Hi.
We're so happy to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
No worries. I thought we could start with you presenting yourself and maybe give us a short overview of IDUN Minerals.
Of course. Yes, so my name is Caroline. I'm a chemical engineer and the COO of IDUN Minerals. The company IDUN Minerals was founded in Sweden about 10 years ago, and it is a Swedish beauty brand focusing on producing cosmetics like makeup, skincare, and hair care. We do all product development in our headquarters in Stockholm, and our vision with the brand and our our tagline is simply pure and clean. And basically that is what we want to do. We want to do cosmetics that should work for all skin colors and all skin types, regardless if you have sensitive skin. And of course, always keep the sustainability and the fact that our products should be safe, not only for humans, but then also with good impact for the environment and for the nature. So we're currently sold and distributed in around 25 countries worldwide, and we've seen a great interest for the brand internationally due to the fact that we have such strong focus on our ingredients and the clean beauty trend, which is now increasing a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that you have never used PFAS in your products. What was the reason for that? Why did you decide that?
Yes, exactly. No, I think that the reason in general is because we have had such a strong focus on the ingredients and the things that we use in our cosmetics. We have had very strong focus on our restricted use list, which is a list of ingredients that you cannot use, even though they might not be banned by legislation, like you were talking about, Teresa. These kind of things always takes a lot of time to implement. We have a restricted use list of our own where we have ingredients that we do not allow. So, for example, PFAS is one substance of group that we do not allow in our cosmetics. But then to add some more examples, which a lot of you might know about, we, for example, have perfume. We do not allow that in any of our stay-on products due to the fact that we know that it can cause allergies. We don't use any talc, we don't use bismuth, and so on. So we have a bunch of ingredients on that restricted use list, which we have been working on and are working on constantly in order to make sure that we always optimize the ingredients used in the cosmetics.
So who works with defining this, your RSL?
Yeah, it's our product development team who does this, and the regulatory people, of course. We work really closely with our manufacturers, of course, and their regulatory and product development departments, but then also with the external safety assessors in order to make sure that we get as much insights as possible, not only from within the company, but also finding a lot of contact points in order to receive as much information as possible. But it's here locally at the headquarters where we work with the product development, where we define and set the restricted use list.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So have your suppliers ever reacted to you not allowing, for example, PFAS in your products?
Yes, of course. I would say that we're a very demanding customer because of the fact that we do have this restricted use list in general. And I think that, you know, for us, of course, the formulation is very important, how it feels on the skin, how it acts, what the colors look like, and so on. But since we have always worked so much with the ingredients and have such high demands on this, I think that our suppliers have, you know, become a bit used to the fact that we always put these kind of restrictions and demands on them. And I think the key here is definitely to have a very transparent, close, and very honest dialogue about these things, and to define as a brand what's important for you. And for us, it has definitely always been the ingredients, and to have a very, very close dialogue with everyone we work with in order to make sure that we always optimize the ingredients.
So has there ever been a circumstance where you kind of had to switch suppliers, or was it just a bit of a discussion and then they went to your side? Or
no, of course, you always need to give the supplier the benefit of the doubt to try to change, of course. But if we see that there is a partner who is not willing to adapt and to work this way and so closely with us in order to find the best solutions and to be on the forefront with this, of course we have had to terminate and to close cooperations, definitely.
So what about the communication to your customers? How do you communicate all this?
I mean, it all kind of circles back to the fact that you need to have transparency. That is something that we see, especially since with IDUN Minerals, we always communicate simply, pure and clean. And I think that that also makes the customer expect from us that we should be very, very transparent and very honest and so on with the communication. So we always try to communicate everything we can about our ingredients, about how we produce, where we produce, and so on our website, in order to make sure that we can be transparent with the customer and that they can find all information that they want to find regarding our products.
Do you have any more questions, Teresa?
I wonder, have you ever had any negative feedback on this approach from customers in any way, or maybe from other competing brands? What's your experience on that?
I wouldn't say negative. Of course, you can always end up in discussions with people, and like you talked about, Therese, as well, the fact that legislation and new laws and restrictions takes such long time. Of course, there might be people who think that, you know, you shouldn't change anything or have any restrictions that are not actually determined yet by law. I mean, that is always a discussion that comes up in different forms. But I think it all has to do with what we stand for as a brand. And we want to be on the forefront, and we want to be one of those brands that really have a lot of information and that actively search for a lot of information, and we want to be proactive. So I think from our perspective, the customer kind of expects us to do so and to be on the forefront and to drive this conversation moving forward. So if anything bad has been said, they probably haven't said it directly to us, but I think that it's definitely something that the end consumer, they expect us to do this kind of work and to be on the forefront, for sure.
Well, I think that I don't have any more questions, actually. So thank you very much, Caroline.
Thank
it's very
you.
valuable to get this sort of industry perspective and hear, sort of the reality of these matters.
Very nice. Perhaps we have received some questions from the audience.
Yes, we have received some questions. Hi, this is Peter, also from ChemSec, jumping in here. So I'm taking the liberty to go to the Q&A slide here. And it's actually a follow-up question for you, Caroline, and I hope you can take a little bit of criticism. So it's someone who says here, it's great that transparency is central to IDUN, but the brand, however, is not free from microplastic ingredients. What's your view on that, and any plans to phase them out?
I mean, when we look at the microplastics, we have looked at the definition of microplastics. And of course, I know that there are a bunch of different definitions out there, depending on what you search for and so on. And we have, you know, based on all the knowledge that we have been able to take in and the research that we have looked into, we have phased out all nylons, all polyethylene, and everything that we define as microplastics, and everything that's insoluble and in a non-liquid phase. Okay.
Also, follow-up question to you regarding packaging, and I think this is something that not many or not everyone is thinking of, that there's a migration risk of PFAS and other chemicals from packaging. So how are you thinking about that when it comes to packaging your cosmetics?
I mean, with our packaging, we're currently doing a very, very big project where we currently phase in new packaging for all our entire assortment, everything from lipstick to shampoo to skincare and so on. So we are doing this work and have been doing it for the past years and will continue to do so for many years moving forward. So of course, everything when it comes to the material properties and how safe it is for the formula, to how it's being recycled, from what the composition looks like of the plastic, of the paper, of the metal and everything. All of that is being considered in that development phase, since we are currently changing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And Teresa, questions for you. I can see that you're typing, but maybe you want to do that live instead.
Yeah.
So, what PFAS are currently covered by the EU cosmetics regulation?
It's not covered in the cosmetics regulation currently, and the cosmetics regulation is quite special, as it only looks at the health side of it, and it has been difficult to define this part. When you classify the PFAS, they haven't come that far when it comes to this. So this is definitely one of the things that could be addressed with this change of scope that we're talking about. And this is very clear from the chemical strategy that this is one of the main intentions. It's addressed in every piece of regulation that is relevant, and this is one of them.
Could you mention also a little bit what do you think that PFAS movement and the companies joining PFAS movement, how can that work be used in ChemSec's legislation work?
Yeah, like Josephine said before, we really try to be the positive voice. And we have learned, and I worked as a legislator myself, the ones knocking on your door when you come with a proposal is not the people who have already substituted or are able and willing to change, but it's the ones that don't want to change. So they are very loud. This is what these policymakers are getting. So for them to hear positive voices that substitution is possible or desirable is very powerful. It's a message that they don't often get. So this is something that we very often try to give to them, either from specific companies or gathering thoughts from a group. So with this, we gain experience within ChemSec that we can deliver this message to the policymakers. But it is also very powerful simply to have the brands gathered saying that this is something that they want. To give this to policymakers, to push them further, is really, really something that makes a difference. And we can also see that having this list of people who attend these meetings, who are interested in joining, is something that we could be using when, for instance, there is a public consultation or some detail needs to be addressed in the policy making. We could always facilitate a dialogue between the brands to ensure that the message that they give could be joined or that you could find support in each other, for instance. So we really try to be a platform and send this positive message to policymakers. And we know from experiences that it makes a big difference.
Mm. So jumping back to Caroline a little bit, the question is, are you producing cosmetics in North America? And if so, how are you, or are you maintaining the similar standards in production, even though there's a great difference in the regulations?
No, we're not producing anything in North America, but if we would, of course, we would use the same restrictions list and so on that we have for IDUN Minerals in general. That is the core of the brand.
Okay.
Yes.
More for you, Caroline. Your brand has chosen a safe ingredients approach. Do you feel that there are compromises that come with that decision, such as product performance or consumer conception, etc.?
I mean, of course, in a perfect world, it would be possible to do everything you can with when it comes to product performance, good ingredients. In the ideal situation would of course be to not have any ingredients at all and still be able to produce a product if you want to be 100% climate okay, so to speak. But I think that it's all about improving, and for us the focus is always on the ingredients, and then we try to make the absolute best, purest and greatest formulas as well for the product performance. And it's for us, it's all about continuing to work with this, because it constantly comes new innovation, new research, and to not feel like you're ever done. You can always improve and you can always do something better. So even if our mascara that we launched 10 years ago wasn't perfect, there is always room for improvement, and there is so much we can do about it. And given the size of the brand today and you know how appreciated a lot of the products are, I think that we have come pretty far where we are right now, but I think that there is always more to be done, definitely.
Okay, great. Teresa, you tagged another question that you wanted to answer it live, no?
I pressed the wrong button.
Okay,
But,
so
it was simply a very valid response to that. It's unbelievable that the EU cosmetics regulation doesn't take the hazard endpoints into consideration, and this person also mentioned the EDCs as being one of these non-threshold substances, and we totally agree that this should be included in the Cosmetics Directive, the Cosmetics Regulation. Sorry. So thank you for that comment.
I have another question here that I guess it goes to both Teresa and Caroline. Maybe you can answer first, Caroline. So how often does it happen that there is no alternative to an ingredient that contains PFAS?
That has not happened yet.
No? Okay. That's reassuring.
Yeah, but of course it depends on what you want to do. I mean, I can't answer for all cosmetics products worldwide. I can focus on the fact that we do cosmetics product with a classic assortment with a twist. I haven't tried doing a liquid eyeliner that should last 72 hours and contain big chunks of glitter inside. So I mean, I can't answer for that, but from IDUN's perspective, we have always been able to produce without it, without any problems.
I also notice when it comes to clothes, for example, that sometimes, you know, they advertise rain jackets that can withstand a skyfall for, you know, 72 hours. And maybe that's not always necessary to have that kind of function, but you could actually have a rain jacket that, you know, could withstand water for 2 hours, and that's enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there, if I could just add something there, you touch upon what is known as essential use and non-essential use, which is very relevant when it comes to all the PFAS changes that we are about to see. And it's very true that also customers will have to change their expectations on products in general, because of course often these substances come with a specific type of functionality, but sometimes it's a question if the customer really wants this functionality, or if they want it because it is there. So I think there will be a shift, and we are already starting to see it, I would say.
Teresa, could you also say something brief about the connection between REACH and US regulation, and that they're different, but they're still affecting each other? Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, the reason that we focus very much on the EU regulation is because we think it has the largest impact, because it is only applicable in the EU, but many companies do adjust to it anyway because they want to sell their products on the EU market. On the cosmetics, though, I would say that we have seen quite a number of brands having several production lines with a different content when it comes to cosmetics in particular, which I find really problematic. So I am looking forward to exploring the possibilities to have US companies join as well, because there it is much less regulated. It is a much bigger problem, and not only because of regulation, but I guess also as a result of it, that products do contain more problematic substances there in cosmetics in general.
So 2 more questions, then I think we need to close. Caroline, how do you check the purity of raw materials concerning contaminants?
You do testing of that in order to make sure. Yeah.
Okay, but so you do like batch testing or?
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And we also have partners internationally for the export that demands this for us.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then we have the $1 million question. You know, as consumers, how can we be aware of which products that contain PFAS? And they are not mentioned on the INCI. That's the number, right? Or the ingredients list. Sorry for not knowing these this shortening. The INCI.
Can I maybe answer that one
Yeah.
to start with? I would say that right now it's impossible. I guess what you have to do is to contact the brand to see, and I mean, that's not really feasible. So our goal is, of course, that as a consumer, you should know that the products that you buy are safe. And that's currently not the case. So this is why we are working so hard to change this. So the simple answer is, you don't know.
Okay, thank you. Josephine, do you want to close?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to all of you, and to you especially, Caroline. As I mentioned before, feel free to send us an email if you have any questions. We also invite all companies here today to join the PFAS movement. So feel free to email me to set up a time for that too. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much to everyone.
Yeah, and I can say that there will be a recording and the slides available afterwards. It will take some time for us to upload everything, but it will be available on the ChemSec's website, chemsec.org. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. We always post relevant news there for companies regarding chemicals. Please check that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.